Have you ever spent 10 years serving a family that never once said thank you? Just 25 people. Handle it. That's how my father announced, not asked, not requested, that I would cook, clean, and cater to his wealthy friends on Christmas Eve. He smirked like it was the most natural thing in the world, like I was the help. My name is Lila Thompson. I'm 32 years old, and for the past decade, I've been the reliable daughter, which apparently means the daughter you can take for granted. But this year, I had other plans. A flight to Florida, booked a month in advance, my first vacation in 4 years, and a decision that would change everything. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. This is the story of how I finally chose myself, and what my father's face looked like when 25 guests arrived to an empty kitchen. The year my mother died, I was 22 years old and fresh out of college, with a finance degree I'd worked 4 years to earn. It was ovarian cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. She lasted 11 months after the diagnosis. 11 months of hospital visits, of holding her hand while the morphine drip counted down her final hours, of watching my father take phone calls from business partners during her final week. At the funeral, Gerald Thompson, my father, stood at the podium in a $3,000 Armani suit and delivered a eulogy that lasted exactly 4 minutes. I counted. He mentioned her dedication to the family 3 times and checked his watch twice. That was June 2014. By July, I'd made my decision. I would stay close to home. Someone needed to look after Grandma Virginia, who was 74 at the time and still grieving her only daughter-in-law who'd actually treated her like family. My brother Brandon, he moved to San Diego 3 weeks after the funeral. Career opportunity, he said. Can't pass it up. My father drove him to the airport personally, hugged him at the gate, told him how proud he was. Me, I got a handshake and instructions to keep an eye on things. And so I did. For 10 years. Every Thanksgiving, I was the one who arrived at 6 in the morning to prep the turkey. Every Christmas, I spent December 23rd shopping for ingredients, and December 24th cooking from dawn until the first guests arrived. Every birthday party for my father, and there were 10 of them, each more elaborate than the last. I was the invisible hands in the kitchen while he accepted congratulations in the living room. He never once said thank you. Just, good job, Lila. Just like your mother used to do. And then he'd walk away. Thanksgiving 2023. 1 month before everything changed. Brandon flew in from San Diego on Wednesday evening. My father drove the Porsche Cayenne, the pearl white one, $97,000, according to the invoice I'd accidentally seen on his desk. 45 minutes to JFK just to pick him up personally. I drove myself. 45 minutes from my apartment in Manhattan, after working a 10-hour day at Hartwell and Associates, with 3 bags of groceries I'd purchased with my own money sitting in the back seat of my Honda Civic. When I walked through the door at 7:30 p.m., Brandon was already settled in the living room with a whiskey in hand. My father sat across from him, leaning forward, actually listening as my brother talked about some marketing campaign he'd led at his tech company. "That's my boy," my father said, clapping Brandon on the shoulder. "That's the Thompson drive right there." I set the grocery bags on the kitchen counter. Nobody offered to help. Dinner was the usual performance. Brandon sat at my father's right hand, the position of honor, while I shuttled between the kitchen and dining room, refilling wine glasses and clearing plates. Diane, my stepmother, offered a weak smile each time I passed, but never stood up to assist. At one point, I mentioned my promotion, senior analyst at Hartwell and Associates, a title I'd worked 3 years to earn. "Oh, that's nice," my father said, not looking up from his plate. "Lila, can you bring out more of that cranberry sauce? Richard loved it last year." Richard, his golf buddy. A man I'd met twice and would never remember my name. Later that night, while everyone laughed in the living room, I stood alone at the sink. The water was scalding, my hands were red, and on my phone screen, a confirmation email glowed. United Airlines, confirmation number UA847LT1201. December 24th. Departure, 2:00 p.m. I'd booked it a week ago. I hadn't told anyone yet. It was nearly midnight when I finally finished the dishes. From the living room, I could hear my father's booming laugh, followed by Brandon's voice telling some story about a client in Los Angeles, Diane's occasional murmur, the clink of crystal glasses. I stood at the sink, hands pruned from 2 hours of scrubbing, and did the math. 10 years, 10 Thanksgivings, 10 Christmases, 10 birthday parties for my father, each one requiring at least 15 hours of preparation and cleanup. Add in Easter brunches, 4th of July barbecues, random dinner parties whenever my father wanted to impress someone. Conservative estimate, 600 hours of labor, probably more. I pulled up my phone and searched. Professional catering costs Westchester County. The numbers made my stomach turn. A full-service catering company for events of this size charged between $150 and $200 per person. For a 20-person gathering, that meant $3,000 to $4,000 per event. For the approximately 50 events I'd handled over the past decade, $150,000 to $200,000. My father had never paid me a cent, never offered to reimburse the groceries I'd bought with my own money, never so much as handed me a gift card as thanks. I looked at the plane ticket confirmation again. $3,200 for 2 round-trip tickets to Miami. One for me, one for my best friend Evelyn. Non-refundable. Departure in exactly 1 month. For the first time in 10 years, I'd made plans that didn't revolve around this family. I screenshot the email from my father sent 3 days ago, the one asking me to handle the Christmas arrangements like always. Gerald Thompson at thompsonpremier.com. Timestamp, December 15th, 2024, 9:47 a.m. Subject line, Christmas Eve. The message was 3 sentences long. No please, no if you're available. Just instructions. I saved it to a folder labeled Documentation. I didn't know yet what I'd use it for, but something told me I might need it. Lee, please tell me you're not thinking about canceling. Evelyn Carter's voice came through my AirPods as I drove back to Manhattan, the Westchester suburbs fading in my rearview mirror. We'd been best friends since freshman year at NYU. She was the one who'd held my hair back during finals week breakdowns, who'd shown up with wine and takeout after every one of my failed relationships. I'm not thinking about it, I said. I'm just processing. Processing what? The fact that you've worked yourself to the bone for a family that treats you like the help? I winced. Evelyn had never met my father, but she'd heard enough stories over the years to form a detailed opinion. It's not that simple. If I just don't show up, then what? Your father has to order takeout? The horror. I laughed despite myself. He'll be furious. Good, let him be furious. Her voice softened. Lila, you haven't taken a vacation in 4 years. 4 years. You've spent $3,000 on this trip, non-refundable, I might add. And more importantly, you're 32 years old and you've never had a Christmas that was just for you. The highway lights blurred past. I thought about the email on my phone, about the dishes I'd just spent 2 hours washing, about my father's voice saying, "That's my boy," to Brandon while I carried grocery bags no one offered to help with. What if everyone thinks I'm selfish? I asked quietly. Selfish? Evelyn's laugh was sharp. You've given them 10 years, Lee. You've given them everything. Taking 7 days for yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Call me tomorrow. Need to discuss December. I stared at the message until it blurred. Lila, Evelyn said, you already bought the ticket. That means part of you already decided. Don't let them take this from you, too. She was right. I just didn't know if I was brave enough to follow through. December 23rd, 2024, the evening before Christmas Eve. I pulled into the driveway of my father's Westchester estate at 6:47 p.m., the same colonial mansion I'd grown up in, 4,200 square feet, 5 bedrooms, 3-car garage, currently assessed at $4.2 million according to Zillow. The porch lights cast a warm glow across the snow-dusted lawn, making everything look deceptively inviting. My father texted again that afternoon. Come for dinner. Important discussion. No greeting. No question mark. Just a summons. Gerald Thompson met me at the door, still wearing his charcoal business suit from whatever meeting had occupied his day. At 61, he remained an imposing figure. 6'2", silver-streaked hair, the kind of permanent tan that came from monthly golf trips to Scottsdale. Good, you're here. He turned and walked toward the living room without waiting for me to take off my coat. Sit down. I need to tell you about Christmas. I followed, my stomach already tightening. He poured himself a scotch, Macallan 18, his favorite, and remained standing by the fireplace. A power position. I recognized it from every negotiation tactic article I'd ever read. My friends will be spending Christmas Eve here, he said. 25 people. The Harmons, the Castellanos, the whole Maple Ridge group. Richard is bringing 2 of his partners. We're close to finalizing that development deal in Greenwich. I waited for the request. For the would you mind or could you possibly. Instead, he smiled. The kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. You'll handle everything, of course, just like every year. My throat constricted. Dad, I actually have plans. Plans? He set down his glass with a sharp clink. On Christmas? I booked a trip to Florida a month ago. The flight is tomorrow at 2. His smile didn't waver, but something cold entered his eyes. Cancel it. I sat in my childhood bedroom that night, the door closed against the heavy silence of the house. The room hadn't changed much since high school. Same pale blue walls, same white desk where I'd studied for the SATs, same window overlooking the backyard where my mother used to plant roses every spring. After she died, no one tended the garden. The rose bushes were just thorns now. I opened the calculator app on my phone. The Florida trip. $3,200 non-refundable. If I canceled now, I'd lose every cent. Evelyn would either have to go alone or eat the cost of her ticket too. But money was just the surface calculation. I scrolled through my calendar, counting backward. The last time I'd taken a real vacation, not a long weekend, not a work trip with a few extra days tacked on, was 2020. Before that, 2018. 4 years without a single week that belonged entirely to me. I thought about Marcus Webb, my colleague at Hartwell, who'd just returned from 2 weeks in Portugal with his wife. You should travel more, Lila, he'd said over coffee. You're burning out. Everyone can see it. I thought about Daniel, my ex-boyfriend, who'd ended things last year because I'd canceled our anniversary trip to help with my father's birthday party. Your family will always come first, he'd said, which means I never will. He wasn't wrong. I opened my email and found my father's message from December 15th again. Lila, I'm hosting Christmas Eve this year, expecting about 25 guests. Handle the menu and preparations like always. This is an important evening for the business. The Harmon deal depends on impressing the right people. Don't let me down. Don't let me down. Not, please help if you can. Not, I'd really appreciate it. Not even thank you for everything you've done in the past. Just, don't let me down. I took a screenshot and saved it. I called Grandma Virginia at 10:30 p.m., when I knew she'd still be awake watching her British mystery shows. Lila, sweetheart. Her voice was warm, alert. Not a trace of the frailty people sometimes assumed came with 84 years. I was wondering when you'd call. How was dinner at your father's? Tense. I pulled my knees up to my chest on the narrow bed. He wants me to cook for his Christmas party, 25 people. And you have that trip to Florida. I blinked. How did you know about that? You mentioned it 3 weeks ago, dear. I may be old, but my memory works just fine. A pause. What did you tell him? I tried to explain. He said to cancel. Grandma Virginia made a sound, something between a sigh and a laugh. That sounds like Gerald. Everything on his terms, always. I don't know what to do. If I go, he'll never forgive me. If I stay, If you stay, you'll spend another Christmas being invisible. Her voice sharpened. Lila, do you know who owns that house? The question caught me off guard. Dad, obviously, he's lived there for. The deed is in my name, sweetheart. Has been since 1987, when your grandfather bought it. We let Gerald live there after your grandfather passed because he's my son and he had young children. But legally, that house belongs to me. I sat up straighter. I didn't know that. Most people don't. Your father certainly likes to pretend otherwise. She was quiet for a moment. Robert Callahan, you remember him, the family attorney? He has all the original documents, just in case anyone ever needs to verify. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want you to understand something. Her voice softened. You do what you need to do, Lila, and whatever happens at that party, I'll be there. I want to see how your father handles things when he can't rely on you. The line went quiet. Then she added, almost to herself, it's time Gerald learned some lessons. December 24th, 2024, 7 o'clock a.m. I woke to pale winter sunlight filtering through my childhood curtains and a folded piece of paper that had been slid under my door sometime during the night. My father's handwriting, the same precise script I remembered from report card signatures and permission slips. I unfolded it and found a shopping list. 45 items. Turkey, 20 Feldsaums minimum. 3 types of wine. Burgundy, Chardonnay, a good champagne for toasts. Ingredients for 4 appetizers, 2 salads, 3 sides, and 2 desserts. Specific brands circled and underlined. A note at the bottom. Everything should be ready by 5:30 p.m. Guests arrive at 6 o'clock. Do not disappoint me. I stared at the list until my vision blurred. My phone showed 7:03 a.m. My flight departed at 2 o'clock p.m. from JFK. Check-in closed at 12:30 p.m. If I left Westchester by 10:30 a.m., I could make it with a reasonable buffer. 7 hours from now. The numbers felt both endless and impossibly short. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Checked in. Got us exit row seats. You at the airport yet? I typed back. Still at my father's. Long story. We'll explain later. 3 dots appeared. Then. Lee, please tell me you're still coming. I looked at the shopping list again. 45 items. At least 8 hours of cooking if I started immediately. A party that would generate at least 3 hours of cleanup afterward. All for 25 people who would never know, or care, who had prepared their meal. Through the floor, I heard movement. The coffee maker gurgling. My father's voice murmuring something to Diane. The house was waking up, and everyone in it assumed I would do exactly what I'd always done. I set down the list and reached for my suitcase, the one I'd packed 3 days ago and hidden in the back of my closet. It was still there. Waiting. Breakfast was at 8 o'clock a.m. sharp, a Thompson family tradition my father enforced like a board meeting. I came downstairs to find Gerald already seated at the head of the dining table, reading the Wall Street Journal on his tablet. Diane sat to his left, nursing a cup of tea with the careful movements of someone perpetually afraid of making noise. Good morning. I poured myself coffee, keeping my voice neutral. Dad, we need to talk about today. He didn't look up. What's there to talk about? The list is clear. I told you last night, I have a flight at 2. Now he looked up. His expression was patient in a way that somehow felt more threatening than anger. Lila, we discussed this. No, you told me to cancel. That's not a discussion. Then let me clarify. He set down the tablet with deliberate care. 25 people are coming to this house tonight. 2 of them are partners in an $8 million development deal that I've spent 6 months cultivating. This is not a casual gathering. This is business. And you are the only person in this family capable of managing it properly. Brandon is in California. You could hire caterers. On Christmas Eve. Don't be naive. Diane stirred her tea, eyes fixed on the cup. She wouldn't look at me. Dad, I paid $3,000 for this trip. I planned it a month ago. Then you should have consulted me first. His voice hardened. This is what family means, Lila. We show up for each other. We make sacrifices. I've been making sacrifices for 10 years. The words hung in the air. Gerald's eyes narrowed. Diane set down her teacup with a soft clink. What did you say? My father asked quietly. Something in me cracked. Not broken, but splitting open. I said I've been making sacrifices for 10 years. Every holiday, every party, every time you needed something handled. I kept my voice steady. When does it end? My father set down his coffee cup with exaggerated calm, the kind of calm that preceded storms. Let me make sure I understand. His voice was measured, almost pleasant. You're comparing yourself to Brandon? Brandon, who has built a career across the country? Brandon, who has actual professional responsibilities? I have professional responsibilities too. I'm a senior analyst at Hartwell and Associates. I manage portfolios worth. You work in an office. Gerald waved his hand dismissively. That's not the same as running a business. That's not the same as building something. I felt my face flush. I make $185,000 a year. The number landed like a slap. Diane's eyes widened slightly. My father's expression flickered. Surprise, then something darker. Then hire someone to help you cook, he said flatly, if you're so successful. That's not the point. The point is that I never asked you to sacrifice anything. You chose to help. You chose to be part of this family. If that's suddenly become a burden, perhaps you should reconsider what family means. I didn't choose this. I stayed because Mom died and someone had to. Don't. His voice cracked like a whip. Don't bring your mother into this. I stared at him. Why not? You never do. You barely mentioned her at her own funeral. The silence that followed was absolute. Diane had stopped breathing. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its hum. Gerald stood slowly, straightening his cuffs with mechanical precision. When he spoke again, his voice was ice. Lila, you have a choice to make. Either you stay and fulfill your responsibilities to this family, or you get on that plane. He met my eyes. But if you leave, if you walk out that door today, don't call me your father anymore. Because my daughter would never abandon her family for a vacation. He walked out of the kitchen without waiting for my response. I stood frozen for exactly 10 seconds. I counted them. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. The way I used to count when I was a child, hiding in my room while my parents argued downstairs. Diane hadn't moved. Her tea had gone cold, and she was staring at the tablecloth like it contained the secrets of the universe. Diane. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Did you hear what he just said? She flinched. Lila, your father is under a lot of stress. The Harmon deal. Did you hear what he said? Finally, she looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. She wouldn't defend me. She never had. In the 3 years since she'd married my father, Diane had perfected the art of strategic silence. I understood then. I had been waiting for something. For someone to stand up, to say, Gerald, that's too far. For 10 years, I'd been waiting for permission that would never come. I walked upstairs. My suitcase was where I'd left it, packed and ready. My passport sat on the nightstand beside my phone. 9:24 a.m. I had time. I changed into comfortable travel clothes, jeans, a soft sweater, sneakers. I checked my boarding pass. I texted Evelyn. Leaving now. See you at the gate. Her response was immediate. Finally. Margaritas are waiting. I carried my suitcase down the stairs, through the foyer, past the kitchen where the shopping list still sat on the counter, untouched. My father was in his study, door closed. I didn't knock. At the front door, I paused just long enough to say, quietly, to no one in particular, I guess this is what choosing myself looks like. Then I walked out into the December cold, loaded my suitcase into my Honda, and drove toward JFK. My hands didn't shake until I hit the highway. The I-278 was mercifully empty. Christmas Eve traffic hadn't fully kicked in yet, and the morning commuters had already cleared. I drove with both hands on the wheel, knuckles white against the leather. Every few minutes, I glanced at my phone mounted on the dashboard. 3 missed calls from my father, then 4, then 5. At 9:47 a.m., the calls stopped. A text appeared instead. "You will regret this. I won't forgive you for this embarrassment." I stared at the word embarrassment until a car horn behind me snapped my attention back to the road. Not, "I'm worried about you." Not, "Please reconsider." Not even, "We need to talk." Embarrassment. That was what mattered most to Gerald Thompson. Not that his daughter was hurt. Not that she'd spent a decade being taken for granted. Just that his Christmas party might not go perfectly. I pulled up my email at a red light and found the message from December 15th, screenshot, save. Then I opened my messages and sent it to Evelyn. "If anything happens, here's proof of how my father treats me. Email from 12:15, read the tone." Her response came 30 seconds later. "Jesus. Handle it like always. Not even a please. Lee, I'm so proud of you for leaving." I thought about Grandma Virginia's words from last night, about the house that wasn't really my father's, about Robert Callahan, the attorney, who had documents that could verify everything. I didn't fully understand why she'd told me those things, but I saved the information in the same mental folder where I'd been storing evidence for years, all the small cruelties, the overlooked contributions, the moments that felt wrong but were never acknowledged. Ahead, signs for JFK Airport began to appear. Behind me, Westchester grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. Terminal 1 at JFK was a controlled chaos of holiday travelers, families wrangling overstuffed luggage, couples in matching Santa hats, business people scowling at their phones. I spotted Evelyn before she saw me. She was standing near the United Airlines check-in counter, wearing a bright coral sundress under her winter coat like a declaration of intent. When she caught my eye, her face split into a grin that made something tight in my chest finally release. "You made it!" She pulled me into a hug so fierce my ribs creaked. "Lee, I was genuinely worried you'd turn around on the highway." I almost did, 3 times. "But you didn't." She held me at arm's length, studying my face. "Tell me everything. What happened?" I gave her the condensed version while we checked our bags, the shopping list under my door, the confrontation at breakfast, my father's ultimatum. By the time I finished, Evelyn's expression had cycled through shock, fury, and something that looked almost like pride. "He said you're not his daughter if you leave?" Her voice was too loud. A nearby family glanced our way. "That's genuinely unhinged. Keep it down." But I was almost smiling. He was trying to manipulate me. It just didn't work this time. "Because you're finally done." Evelyn linked her arm through mine as we headed toward security. 4 years, Lila. I've been waiting 4 years for you to put yourself first." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown Westchester number. No, not unknown. Grandma Virginia's landline. "Just spoke to Gerald. He's in quite a state. Don't worry about him. I'm heading to the house for the party tonight. I want to see how this unfolds. Enjoy your vacation, sweetheart. You deserve it." I read the message twice. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Not quite guilt, not quite anticipation. Something was going to happen tonight, and for the first time I wouldn't be there to fix it. Flight UA 847 pushed back from the gate at exactly 2:03 p.m. I sat in the exit row, extra legroom, a small luxury that felt almost decadent, with Evelyn already dozing beside me, her eye mask firmly in place. Outside my window, New York sprawled gray and winter brown beneath a thin layer of clouds. As the plane taxied toward the runway, I did the math again. 6 p.m. Guests would begin arriving at my father's house. 6:15 p.m. Someone would notice the kitchen was cold, the counters empty, no smells of roasting turkey or mulled wine. 6:30 p.m. Gerald Thompson would realize with growing horror that his daughter had called his bluff. The engines roared, the plane lifted. I watched New York shrink beneath us, the grid of streets becoming abstract, then invisible, then gone entirely. Somewhere down there, my father was pacing his study or barking orders at Diane, or desperately calling caterers who would laugh at a Christmas Eve last-minute request. For 10 years, I had been the safety net, the one who caught every falling plate, smoothed every wrinkled plan, made every impossible deadline somehow work. Today, the net was gone. I thought I would feel guilty. I'd braced for it. The sick twist of conscience, the second guessing, the desperate urge to call and apologize and fix it. Instead, I felt light, lighter than I had in years. Evelyn stirred beside me, lifting her eye mask. "You okay?" "Yeah." I was surprised to realize I meant it. "I actually am." "Good." She squeezed my hand. "Because there's a beach with our names on it, and I refuse to let Thompson family drama ruin our margaritas." My phone was in airplane mode. My father couldn't reach me. For the next 7 days, I belonged only to myself. The last text I'd received before turning off data sat in my notifications. "You will pay for this." I closed my eyes and smiled. We'd see about that. If you've ever been the reliable one in your family, the one everyone counts on but no one thanks, comment "me" below. I promise you, I see you. And if you're wondering what happened when those 25 guests arrived at my father's empty kitchen, trust me, you'll want to hear this. Hit subscribe and tap that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Because my grandmother? She had a few things to say. What happened next, I learned later from my grandmother. She told me every detail over the phone the following week, her memory sharp as ever, her voice carrying a satisfaction she didn't bother to hide. December 24th, 5:45 p.m., Westchester. The first headlights swept up the driveway 15 minutes before the party was scheduled to begin. A silver BMW 7 Series, Richard Harmon's car, the man whose partnership could make or break my father's $8 million development deal. Gerald stood at the front door in his best charcoal suit, the one he reserved for closings and galas. He'd spent the afternoon oscillating between rage and denial, alternately calling my phone, straight to voicemail, and assuring Diane that I would come to my senses and show up. I didn't show up. Richard Harmon stepped out of his car, his wife Margaret on his arm, both dressed in elegant holiday attire. Behind them, more vehicles were pulling in, the Castellanos in their white Mercedes, the Whitfields in a Tesla Model X, the Bradleys in a Range Rover. 25 of Westchester's finest, arriving for what Gerald had promised would be an unforgettable Christmas Eve. "Gerald!" Richard strode forward, hand extended. "The house looks beautiful. I've heard your daughter is quite the cook. Margaret's been talking about that beef Wellington from last year all month." My father's smile didn't waver, but something behind his eyes went very still. "Lila will be out shortly," he said. "She's just finishing up in the kitchen." Richard nodded, satisfied, and moved toward the living room where Diane was directing guests toward the bar, the only preparation my father had managed without me. Gerald glanced toward the back of the house. The kitchen door was closed. He hadn't checked it yet. He was still operating on the assumption that I would never actually leave. By 6:15 p.m., 18 guests had arrived. The living room hummed with polite conversation and the clink of cocktail glasses. My father had stocked the bar generously. Macallan 18 for the men, a selection of wines for everyone else, and the initial mingling was going smoothly. But people were starting to ask about dinner. "Something smells wonderful," Margaret Harmon said, settling into an armchair near the fireplace. "Is that rosemary I detect?" It wasn't. Nothing was cooking. The only smell in the house was Diane's vanilla-scented candles and the faint mustiness of a kitchen that hadn't been used all day. Gerald smiled tightly. "The main courses are almost ready. Please, Help yourself to more wine. At 6:22 p.m., Diane pulled him aside near the stairs. Gerald! Her voice was barely above a whisper, her face pale. I just checked the kitchen. What do you mean, checked? It's empty. The refrigerator. There's nothing in it. No turkey, no ingredients. Lila's car isn't in the driveway. Her hands twisted together. I don't think she's coming. For a long moment, my father said nothing. My grandmother, who had arrived at 6 o'clock p.m. and was quietly observing from the corner of the living room, watched his face change. She described it to me later as a man watching his empire crumble in slow motion. Gerald walked to the kitchen. He opened the door. The counters were spotless, not the spotless of recent cleaning, but the spotless of disuse. The professional grade range he'd installed 3 years ago sat cold and untouched. The shopping list he'd slipped under my door that morning lay exactly where I'd left it, on the marble island, unmarked. His face went pale. 45 items, 25 hungry guests, 0 food prepared. In the living room, the doorbell rang again. More guests arriving for the feast that didn't exist. Gerald Thompson had built a $12 million a year real estate company on his ability to stay calm under pressure. He'd closed deals during market crashes, negotiated contracts at 2 a.m., talked clients off ledges both literal and financial. None of that prepared him for a Christmas party with no food. My grandmother watched him retreat to his study at 6:31 p.m., phone already pressed to his ear. She couldn't hear the conversations, but she could guess their content. Call 1, Giovanni's, the upscale Italian restaurant in town. I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, we're fully booked and our kitchen is closed for private parties. Call 2, Wellington Catering, the company that handled country club events. Christmas Eve, sir, we require a minimum 72-hour notice for holiday events. Call 3, Brandon in San Diego, straight to voicemail. Call 4, Diane's sister who lived in Connecticut. She didn't answer either. At 6:47 p.m., Richard Harmon appeared at the study door. Gerald, everything all right? His tone was pleasant but probing, the kind of voice that could pivot to suspicion in an instant. Some of us are getting a bit hungry. My father emerged with a smile that looked physically painful. Small delay, Richard. A catering mix-up. You know how these holiday services are. I'm sorting it out. Richard nodded slowly. Of course. Though I have to say, after that beef Wellington last year, expectations are high. He paused. That was your daughter's work, wasn't it? Diane mentioned she handles all the cooking. Gerald's smile stiffened further. Lila usually does, yes. She's unavailable this evening. Oh? Nothing serious, I hope? Just a scheduling conflict. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly, the smallest expression of doubt, but he returned to the living room without pressing further. In the corner, my grandmother sipped her water and said nothing. The clock on the mantel read 6:52 p.m. The guests had been there almost an hour, and the kitchen was still cold. At 6:58 p.m., my grandmother set down her glass and stood up. Virginia Ashford moved through the crowd with the quiet authority of someone who had spent 84 years learning exactly who she was. She wore a deep burgundy cashmere cardigan over a cream silk blouse, elegant without ostentation, the kind of outfit that whispered money rather than shouted it. The guests noticed her. They always did. Despite her age, there was something about Virginia that commanded attention, her perfect posture, perhaps, or the sharp intelligence in her eyes. Virginia! Gerald emerged from his study, face flushed. He hadn't expected her to come. She usually declined his larger gatherings, citing fatigue that everyone knew was selective. Mother, you made it. I wouldn't miss it, she smiled, but there was steel beneath the warmth. Such an important party. All your friends, your business partners, the Harmon deal on the line. Gerald's expression flickered. You know about that? I know many things, dear. She glanced around the room, then back at her son. Where's Lila? The question landed like a physical blow. Several nearby guests turned at the name, Richard Harmon among them, his cocktail glass pausing halfway to his lips. Gerald's voice dropped. Mother, this isn't the time. Isn't it? Virginia's tone remained pleasant, conversational. I'm simply asking where my granddaughter is. She usually handles these gatherings so beautifully. I wanted to thank her. She couldn't make it tonight. Couldn't or wouldn't? The room had gone quiet, not silent. Glasses still clinked, conversations still murmured at the edges, but a pocket of stillness had formed around Gerald and his mother, drawing attention like a whirlpool. Virginia's eyes moved from her son to the kitchen door, still firmly closed. Gerald, she said, her voice carrying just enough to reach the nearest guests. Who owns this house? He blinked. What? It's a simple question. Who owns this house? Gerald's face went very still. Mother, he said quietly, warningly. Not here. But Virginia was already moving toward the center of the living room, and people were parting to let her through, not consciously perhaps, but with the instinctive deference crowds show to those who expect it. Everyone! Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried, the quality of a former schoolteacher who'd spent 40 years commanding classrooms. May I have your attention for just a moment? The room hushed. Even the bar noise quieted as Diane stopped mid-pour. I want to clarify something that seems to have been misunderstood for quite some time. Virginia reached into her cardigan pocket and withdrew a folded document, a photocopy, slightly yellowed at the edges. This house, this lovely home where my son has been hosting gatherings for the past 15 years, is registered under my name, Virginia May Ashford. It has been since 1987, when my late husband, Gerald's father, purchased it as an investment property. She held up the paper. Even from across the room, the formal letterhead of a law firm was visible. Callahan and Associates, Family Law. I have allowed my son to live here because he is my son, and because his children, my grandchildren, needed a stable home after their mother passed. Virginia's gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Richard Harmon, whose expression had sharpened with interest. But I think there has been some confusion about who, precisely, is in charge here. Gerald stepped forward. Mother, this is inappropriate. What's inappropriate? Virginia said, her voice quiet but absolute. Is expecting my granddaughter to cook for 25 people on Christmas Eve, year after year, without so much as a thank you. What's inappropriate is treating her like the hired help in her own family home. The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. Richard Harmon was the first to speak. Virginia. He set down his drink and took a step forward. I don't mean to pry into family matters, but I'm confused. Gerald told me the kitchen situation was a catering mix-up. Is that not the case? My grandmother looked at him with something like pity. There is no catering company, Richard. There never was. For the past 10 years, every meal served at these gatherings, every Thanksgiving turkey, every Christmas ham, every perfectly prepared beef Wellington you've praised, was cooked by my granddaughter, Lila Thompson, by herself, without compensation, without acknowledgement, and frequently without thanks. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Margaret Harmon whispered something to her husband. The Castellanos exchanged glances. Lila works as a senior financial analyst at Hartwell and Associates in Manhattan, Virginia continued. She earns $185,000 a year managing investment portfolios. She is not a caterer. She is not a housekeeper. She is a professional woman who has spent a decade being treated like domestic staff by her own father. Gerald's face had gone from pale to mottled red. Mother, that's enough. I'm not finished. Virginia's voice cracked like a ruler on a desk. Today, Lila was supposed to be on vacation. Her first vacation in 4 years. She booked a trip to Florida weeks ago, paid for it herself, planned it herself, looked forward to it like any normal person would. She paused, letting the silence build. And what did my son do when he learned about her plans? He demanded she cancel them. He told her that if she left, she was no longer his daughter. Margaret Harmon's hand flew to her mouth. Richard's expression had gone very, very cold. So Lila left, Virginia finished. She chose herself for once. And here we all are. Virginia reached into her pocket again and withdrew her phone, an iPhone she'd learned to use precisely so she could stay connected with me. I received this from Lila this morning. She adjusted her reading glasses. It's an email my son sent to her on December 15th, 9 days ago. I'll read it aloud so there's no ambiguity. Gerald lunged forward. Mother, you don't need to. The email is from gerald.thompson@thompsonpremier.com. Virginia's voice was clear, unhurried. Sent December 15th, 2024 at 9:47 a.m. Subject line, Christmas Eve. The full text reads as follows. She looked down at the screen. Lila, I'm hosting Christmas Eve this year, expecting about 25 guests. Handle the menu and preparations like always. This is an important evening for the business. The Harmon deal depends on impressing the right people. Don't let me down. She looked up. That's the entire message. No please, no would you mind, no acknowledgement that my granddaughter might have her own life, her own plans, her own Christmas to celebrate. Just handle it and don't let me down. The room had become a tableau of frozen faces. Richard Harmon's jaw was tight. His partner, a man named David Chen whom I'd never met, was actually shaking his head. The email has a full header, Virginia added. Timestamp, sender verification, everything. If anyone would like to see it, I'm happy to share. Our family attorney, Robert Callahan, has been informed as well. Gerald's voice came out strangled. This is a private family matter. It became a business matter the moment you tied it to the Harmon deal. Virginia's eyes were cold. You wanted to impress people, Gerald? Consider them impressed. Several guests were already reaching for their phones. I would learn later that at least 3 of them had begun recording. What happened next took less than 40 minutes. At 7:15 p.m., Richard Harmon approached my father with the expression that had shifted from cold to glacial. Gerald. He didn't extend his hand. I think Margaret and I will be heading out. This isn't what we expected. Richard, please. This is a misunderstanding. My mother is elderly. She's confused. She seems remarkably clear to me. Richard glanced at Virginia, who stood calmly by the fireplace, watching the room empty. And frankly, Gerald, the more I think about it, the more concerns I have about our partnership. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. I'll call you after the holidays. We need to discuss whether moving forward makes sense. The Harmons left. The Castellanos followed 5 minutes later, citing an early morning tomorrow. The Bradleys didn't bother with an excuse. They simply collected their coats and departed without meeting Gerald's eyes. By 7:48 p.m., the living room held only Gerald, Diane, Virginia, and 3 guests too polite or too intrigued to leave. One of them, the Whitfield patriarch, a semi-retired investment banker, approached Gerald with a sympathetic grimace. Tough night, Thompson. For what it's worth, I've got a daughter myself. They grow up, they have their own lives. Sometimes we forget that. Gerald said nothing. When the last guests finally departed at 8:15 p.m., my father stood alone in the center of his living room, a room that should have been filled with laughter and impressed business partners and the sounds of a successful evening. Instead, it held only silence, scattered cocktail napkins, and the faint smell of candles burning too low. Virginia collected her coat from the closet. Gerald, she said from the doorway, you have 48 hours to call your daughter and apologize. A real apology, not a performance. If you don't, we'll need to discuss your living arrangements. She left without waiting for his response. If you think Gerald Thompson got exactly what he deserved, comment karma below. And if you're enjoying this story, please smash that like button. Every like helps this video reach someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's been the invisible one in their family for way too long. The story isn't over yet. My grandmother had spoken, my father had fallen. But now I had to decide. Do I give him another chance? Or do I walk away forever? Miami International Airport, 9:37 p.m. I didn't know any of this had happened when I stepped off the plane. For 7 hours, I'd been unreachable. Phone in airplane mode, mind deliberately blank. Evelyn dozing beside me while I watched the clouds turn pink and then purple and then dark. The moment I switched on my data, my phone nearly vibrated off the seat tray. 47 text messages, 12 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 2 emails flagged urgent. Jesus. Evelyn peered over my shoulder at the notification flood. What the hell happened? I started scrolling. First, a text from my grandmother at 8:22 p.m. The party ended early. I said what needed to be said. Your father is very upset, but that's his own doing. Enjoy your vacation, sweetheart. You earned it. Then Diane at 8:47 p.m. Lila, your grandmother was here. She told everyone about the house, about the email. Gerald is... He's in his study. He hasn't come out. I don't know what to do. Then Brandon, my brother, who hadn't texted me unprompted in months, at 9:15 p.m. Lee, I just heard from Diane. What happened? Also, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. I should have been paying more attention. I read that one 3 times. Finally, a text from an unfamiliar number, but the area code was Westchester. This is Robert Callahan, your grandmother's attorney. Mrs. Ashford asked me to confirm the documents are in order. We'll be available for a call whenever you're ready. Evelyn watched my face cycle through emotions she couldn't identify. Lee? Talk to me. What's going on? I handed her my phone. Let her read it all. When she looked up, her eyes were wide. Your grandmother, she said slowly, is an absolute savage. For the first time since leaving New York, I laughed. We found a quiet corner of the airport bar. 2 margaritas in, jet lag setting in, my phone propped against a bowl of tortilla chips while Evelyn and I watched the video. Brandon had forwarded it with no comment. Just a video file, 3 minutes and 27 seconds long, recorded by someone at the party. I'd later learn it was David Chen, Richard Harmon's partner. The footage was shaky at first, clearly captured on a phone held at waist level to avoid notice. But the audio was crystal clear. My grandmother's voice. For the past 10 years, every meal served at these gatherings, every Thanksgiving turkey, every Christmas ham, was cooked by my granddaughter, Lila Thompson, by herself. Without compensation, without acknowledgement, and frequently, without thanks. Cut to my father's face. I'd never seen him look like that. Not angry, not cold, but exposed. Stripped of the confidence he wore like armor. For the first time in my memory, Gerald Thompson looked small. She chose herself for once, and here we all are. The camera caught Richard Harmon shaking his head, Margaret Harmon's shocked expression, the Whitfields exchanging glances that said, "Did you know about this?" Then the email reading, my grandmother's voice, steady and clear, reciting words my father had probably never expected anyone else to see. Handle the menu and preparations like always. Don't let me down. The video ended with a shot of my father standing alone as guests filed toward the door. His mouth was moving, but no sound came out. Evelyn set down her margarita. That video's already been shared in the Maple Ridge Golf Club group chat, she said, reading from her phone. One of the guys there posted it with the caption, "Guess we know who really ran the Thompson parties." I stared at the frozen frame of my father's face. Good, I said quietly. Let them see. He called at 10:03 a.m. on Christmas Day. I was sitting on the balcony of our Airbnb in Miami Beach, coffee in hand, watching the ocean do what oceans do, endlessly moving, endlessly indifferent. Evelyn had gone for a morning run. I was alone when my phone lit up with Dad. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. Hello, Gerald. The use of his first name landed like a slap. I could hear it in the pause that followed. Lila. His voice was hoarse, from yelling or from sleeplessness, I couldn't tell. Are you satisfied now? Am I satisfied? Your grandmother humiliated me in front of 25 people, business partners, friends, people I've known for decades. His voice rose. Richard Harmon is reconsidering the entire deal. That's $8 million, Lila. $8 million that might not happen because you couldn't cook one dinner. I took a sip of coffee, let the silence stretch. I didn't make grandmother say anything, I said finally. I wasn't even there. But you sent her that email. You set this up. I sent her the email you wrote, Dad. The one where you didn't say please. The one where you told me to handle it like always. That's not me setting you up. That's you showing who you are. Another silence. I could picture him in his study, pacing the way he did when deals went bad, phone pressed to his ear, free hand running through his hair. I told you there would be consequences, he said finally, if you left. You told me I wouldn't be your daughter anymore. I kept my voice level. So I'm not calling you Dad. I'm calling you Gerald. And I'm telling you right now, I will not be your unpaid help anymore. If you want me at future events, you can invite me as a guest, not as staff. I heard him breathing, then the line went dead. He'd hung up. The email arrived 43 hours after my grandmother's deadline. December 26th, 8:17 p.m. I was at a seafood restaurant in Key West with Evelyn, halfway through a plate of grilled mahi-mahi, when my phone buzzed with a notification that made me set down my fork. From Gerald Thompson at thompsonpremier.com. To lila.thompson@gmail.com. CC virginia.ashford@gmail.com, brandon.thompson@gmail.com, diane.thompson@gmail.com. Subject: Apology. I opened it slowly, not sure what to expect. Lila. I have spent the last 48 hours thinking about what happened at Christmas. Your grandmother gave me a deadline to apologize, and I'm choosing to meet it, not because she forced me to, but because I've realized some things I should have understood years ago. I was wrong. I was wrong to treat you like someone whose only value was what you could do for me. I was wrong to compare you to Brandon, to dismiss your career, to expect you to sacrifice your plans without consideration. I was wrong to say you weren't my daughter if you left. You are my daughter. You have always been my daughter, even when I failed to act like your father. I cannot undo 10 years of behavior in one email. I'm not sure I can undo it at all, but I want to try, if you'll let me. I'm sorry. Gerald. I read it 3 times. Then I handed my phone to Evelyn. She read it silently, her expression shifting from skepticism to surprise. There's no but, she said finally. No, I'm sorry, but you also hurt me. No excuses. I noticed. Lee? She looked at me carefully. What are you going to do? I took my phone back, stared at the words on the screen. I don't know yet, I admitted. But for the first time, I think he might actually mean it. The Harmon deal didn't die, but it didn't survive unscathed either. My grandmother called me on January 2nd, my first day back in New York, still tan and slightly disoriented by the cold, to fill in the details. Richard Harmon's office called your father yesterday, she said. The partnership is being restructured. What does that mean? It means the deal is on hold indefinitely. Richard told Gerald he needs time to reconsider the personal dynamics before moving forward. She paused. In business terms, that usually means they're looking for reasons to walk away entirely. I did the math. An $8 million development deal in Greenwich, the kind of project that would have generated commission and partnership fees in the high 6 figures, maybe more. How much does Dad stand to lose? Conservatively, $400,000 in potential commission if the deal falls through. More importantly, he loses the reputation boost. The Thompson worked with Harmon prestige that would have opened other doors. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. I didn't want this, I said quietly. I just wanted to go on vacation. I know, sweetheart. My grandmother's voice softened. But sometimes the consequences of someone's actions catch up with them whether we intend it or not. Gerald built that deal on the foundation of exploiting you. When the foundation crumbled, so did everything on top of it. She paused. He's already started calling other partners, trying to salvage other opportunities. Your father is a survivor. He won't go bankrupt over this. But he's been humbled in a way I haven't seen since his father passed. I looked out my apartment window at the Manhattan skyline, gray and glittering. Is that a good thing? I asked. We'll see, she said. We'll see. The Maple Ridge Country Club was where my father's social world revolved. $45,000 annual membership dues, a waiting list that stretched 3 years, monthly dinners with the kind of people who featured in Westchester magazine's 40 Under 40 and 50 Over 50 issues. It was also, as I learned through my grandmother's careful intelligence network, where the video had spread fastest. The first week of January, Gerald returned to the club for his regular Thursday golf game. My grandmother heard what happened from one of her bridge partners, whose husband was in the foursome. The greetings were polite but cool. The handshakes were brief. Nobody mentioned Christmas, which was in itself a statement. In a world where social performances were everything, silence was the loudest verdict. At the 19th hole, the club bar, Gerald ordered his usual Macallan. The bartender, who'd known him for 7 years, served it without the customary small talk. Harrison Whitfield, the semi-retired investment banker who'd been at the party, approached with a gin and tonic and a measured expression. Gerald, good to see you. Harrison. How's Diane? She's well. And your daughter, Lila? My father's glass paused halfway to his lips. She's fine, busy with work. I'm sure. Harrison sipped his drink. You know, I spoke to Richard yesterday. Sounds like the Greenwich project might not happen after all. Gerald said nothing. These things have a way of working out, Harrison continued. Or not. He set down his glass. My wife mentioned something to me last week. Said maybe we've all been a little blind to how our families actually function. Made me call my daughter. She lives in Boston now, busy with her own life. First real conversation we'd had in months. He patted Gerald on the shoulder. Sometimes it takes a wake-up call, he said. At least you got one. Then he walked away. Brandon called me on January 5th, the first real phone call we'd had in over a year. I was walking home from work, headphones in, briefcase heavy with quarterly reports, when his name popped up on my screen. I almost declined it out of habit. Then I remembered his text from Christmas night. I should have been paying more attention. Hey, I said. Hey. His voice was hesitant, unfamiliar. Is this a bad time? I'm walking home. I have about 15 minutes. That's enough. A pause. Lee, I wanted to... I know I'm late to this. Really late. But I'm sorry. I kept walking. Let the silence prompt him to continue. I've been thinking about it ever since Diane called me on Christmas. About all the holidays I flew in for, ate your food, sat in the living room while you cleaned up. I told myself you liked doing it, that you were just good at that stuff, that it was your choice. It wasn't my choice, Brandon. It was the only option I was given. I know that now. His voice cracked slightly. I was comfortable being the prodigal son. It was easier to be the one who shows up twice a year and gets treated like a hero than to be the one who shows up every time and gets treated like the help. I stopped walking. A woman brushed past me on the sidewalk, muttering something about tourists blocking the path. What are you going to do about it? I asked. I'm flying out this summer. For a month, not a weekend. And I'm going to cook. Badly, probably. But I'm going to try. And I'm going to talk to Dad. Really talk to him. Not just nod along while he tells me how great I am. Brandon, I don't expect you to forgive me right away, he said quickly. I just needed you to know I see it now. I see you. I closed my eyes. That's a start, I said finally. The email from HR arrived on February 14th, Valentine's Day, which felt either poetic or ironic, depending on how I chose to interpret it. From SADS, HR notifications at Hartwell Associates. Com. Subject. Promotion recommendation. Thompson, Lila. Dear Ms. Thompson, we are pleased to inform you that you have been nominated for promotion to Associate Director, effective March 1st. This advancement reflects your exceptional performance, consistently positive client feedback, and the leadership you have demonstrated within the Financial Analysis Division. Pending final approval from the Executive Committee, your new compensation package will include a base salary of $225,000 annually, plus performance bonuses and enhanced benefits. Please schedule a meeting with your department head at your earliest convenience to discuss transition details. Congratulations on this well-deserved recognition. I read it 3 times before I believed it was real. Marcus Webb found me in the break room an hour later, grinning like he'd just closed a major deal. Heard the news, he said, pouring himself a coffee. Congratulations, Thompson. Overdue, if you ask me. Thanks, Marcus. I'm still processing. Process faster. The executive committee approved it this morning, I checked. He leaned against the counter. You know what I think made the difference? My dazzling personality? He laughed. That too. But honestly, this year you weren't distracted. No constant family emergencies pulling you away. No holiday scrambles that left you exhausted for weeks afterward. He paused. Whatever changed in your personal life, keep doing it. I thought about Florida, about the empty kitchen in Westchester, about choosing myself for the first time in a decade. I intend to, I said. That evening, I booked a solo trip to Barcelona for June. 2 weeks. Non-refundable. My first vacation that belonged entirely to me. Well, second. But who was counting? I drove to Westchester on a Saturday in mid-March, not to my father's house, but to my grandmother's apartment. A 2-bedroom condo in a quiet complex, the kind of place that smelled like lavender and books. She was waiting with tea service already set out. Bone china cups, lemon slices, the shortbread cookies I'd loved since childhood. Sit, sit. She gestured to the chair across from her. You look well, rested, different. Good different? Yes. She poured the tea with steady hands. You're standing straighter. Did you know that? I hadn't noticed. But now that she mentioned it, I felt it. Something in my spine that had uncurled. Some tension that had quietly released. I wanted to thank you, I said, for what you did at Christmas. I should have said it sooner. There's nothing to thank me for. I said what I'd been wanting to say for years. She sipped her tea. I was only waiting for you to take the first step. Why? Because if I'd intervened too early, you might have believed you couldn't do it yourself. You needed to walk out that door on your own power. She set down her cup. The speech at the party, that was just confirmation. You were the one who chose to leave. I thought about that morning in December. The suitcase packed in secret. The highway stretching toward JFK. The moment I decided that I mattered more than a shopping list. I almost didn't go, I admitted. But you did. That's what matters. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin paper thin, her grip surprisingly strong. Boundaries, Lila, are not walls to keep people out. They're doors. You choose who enters. You choose when to open them. She smiled. You learned that lesson. Now hold on to it. I squeezed her hand back. I will. We met at a restaurant in April, neutral ground, neither his territory nor mine. Gerald had suggested a steakhouse in White Plains, the kind of place with leather booths and prices that required no small amount of disposable income. I agreed because public spaces made difficult conversations easier, harder to yell in front of waiters. He was already seated when I arrived, the first time in my memory that my father had been early for anything involving me. He stood as I approached, a gesture so unfamiliar it momentarily threw me off balance. Lila, thank you for coming. Gerald. We sat. He looked older than he had at Christmas, not dramatically so, but enough to notice. More lines around the eyes, less certainty in his posture. The Harmon deal had fallen through completely by then. Word had spread through the Westchester business community. My father was no longer untouchable. "I've been thinking," he said, after the waiter had taken our order, "about what it would take to rebuild this." This meaning? Our relationship. He met my eyes. "I know I can't erase 10 years in one dinner. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness. I'm asking for an opportunity to try differently." I took a sip of water, let the silence stretch. What would differently look like? "No more expectations." He said it carefully, like he'd rehearsed. "If I host holidays, I'll hire professionals. You'll be a guest, not staff. If you have plans, those plans matter. No ultimatums, no guilt trips." He paused. "And I'll actually listen when you talk about your life." I studied his face, looking for the performance, the angle, the manipulation. I couldn't find it. "I'll come to Thanksgiving," I said finally, "as a guest. We'll see how it goes from there." He nodded. "That's fair." We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. But when I left the restaurant that evening, something between us had shifted, not healed, but moved. It was enough for now. December 24th, 1 year later. I sat in my father's living room, the same room where, 12 months earlier, 25 guests had watched his world crumble. The furniture was the same. The fireplace crackled the same way. But everything else was different. For one thing, I wasn't in the kitchen. A catering company had handled everything. A professional outfit from Greenwich, $4,500 for 20 guests, all inclusive. The smell of roasted duck and herb-crusted potatoes drifted through the house, but none of it had come from my hands. For another, I was wearing a dress instead of an apron. Seated between Brandon, who had flown in a week early and had spent 3 days genuinely helping with preparations, and Grandma Virginia, who watched everything with quiet satisfaction. My father stood at the head of the table, glass raised. "Before we eat," he said, "I want to say something." The room quieted. It was a smaller gathering than last year, mostly family, a few close friends. The Harmons were notably absent. So were most of the golf club crowd. "A year ago, I made a serious mistake." Gerald's voice was steadier than I expected. "I took someone for granted. I treated her contributions as obligations rather than gifts. And when she finally stood up for herself, I punished her for it." He looked at me. "Lila, I want you to know, in front of everyone here, that I'm sorry. And I'm grateful. Grateful that you're here tonight as family, not as staff. Grateful that you gave me another chance." The room was silent. Diane was crying softly. Brandon looked like he might start. I stood up and raised my glass. "To second chances," I said, "and to families that learn." We drank. Later that night, after the caterers had cleaned up and the guests had gone, I stood on the porch looking at the snow. Not invisible anymore, just myself. And that was enough. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you've ever been the reliable one who never got thanked, the one who gave and gave until there was nothing left, I want you to know, your boundaries matter. Your time matters. You matter. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories like this one. And check the description for the next video about a daughter-in-law who was dismissed by everyone until they discovered whose name was actually on the mortgage. See you in the next one.